Good evening. You're watching the Catholic Monarchist podcast. Now that the dust has settled, let's spend a bit of time studying over the election results in a more detailed manner. Most of us are aware of how the presidential, U.S. Senate, and U.S. House races have gone, or are going. And yes, they are more exciting because they're more big picture, because the media talks about them, and because there's an abundance of statistics and data out there to see about them. But when it's all said and done, there's not much we can do to influence them on the primary or the general level. But once we start narrowing down and getting closer to local levels, naturally our influence expands. Let me ask you, do you know who won the state Senate election in your district? What about the state house? Do you know which party controls these chambers? Who's in your city council? These are races that directly impact us. Yet the vast majority of the country know nothing about them. And I believe a huge culprit for this is the internet. We live in a time when we can know everything about everywhere. More people know about a U.S. House representative in a state thousands of miles away from them than they do about their own mayor. So what's the solution? Well, we have to start small. Are we ourselves being good citizens? Are we net positives? For example, do we help keep our towns clean? Do we volunteer to help others? Are we making sure we're well informed about the candidates on the ballot? Or are we just voting blindly? Are we making voting decisions based on what we believe benefits the community as a whole or for our own personal gains? If we're raising families, are we raising our kids to follow these same principles? If we have influence in our community, are we using it to help the true good of the souls entrusted to our care? And, I'm certainly not a prime example of many of these things myself. There's a lot I can improve. And they are all areas I'm sure a lot of us might struggle with. Part of why I have my channel is especially, or eventually, for it to be a centralized place of information for local and Kansas elections, so that the people in my town, county, district, and so on can have a complete and easy to access location for information regarding races, which is otherwise almost kind of impossible to find, at least not with a quick search. I certainly don't have all of the answers either, but I am learning new things as time goes on. Just recently now, I realized that Republicans took a slim majority in the State Board of Education here in Kansas. The first time in 20 years. That's actually extremely important on the local level. I mean, these people ultimately decide what can be taught in the classrooms across the state. Most people don't have the time or the interest to go too deeply into politics, to research every candidate, etc., especially people who are raising children. That's why it's so important to have better access to general information regarding these smaller elections. And I get it, it may be boring sometimes, but nothing is a quick or easy fix. The bigger issues won't get better unless the smaller ones are done first. And that's why we first need to get good people to run in the Republican Party. And then we can vote Republican every year. There's just not much use in voting Republican if they're going to be neocon swamp creatures, which is what our options are in the federal elections. Consequently, this is another point as to why voting-based governance is wrong. For it to run somewhat properly, it needs a majority of the voting populace to be well informed in governmental matters so that they are voting for what's best in their communities and their country. That being said, most people's duties do not allow the time needed to research these things in detail. Or it might just not be a good fit for a different personality, or someone who could easily become upset and discouraged by all the negativity around them, for example. And I hope that my channel can help somewhat to clarify and simplify things, and hopefully put them in a more positive light. So anyway, that's enough preaching for now. Let's get into the fun stuff. Let me start with Kansas. Kind of sounds like an oxymoron. So, before Tuesday's elections, Republicans held supermajorities in both the state House and the Senate. A supermajority, of course, is if you occupy at least 2/3 of the seats. So they led Republicans. They led 85-40 in the House and 29-11 in the Senate. Leading up to this election, the Democrat governor pushed very hard to get a few of these seats to flip and eliminate these supermajorities. She even started a $2 million PAC, Public Affairs Committee, to help make that happen. And hilariously, not only did it not work, but Republicans actually added to their majority. So if all unofficial results hold up, they have now an 88-37 lead in the House, up from 85-40, and a 31-9 lead in the Senate, up from 29-10. And this ensures a little more padding, just in case a few rogue Republicans side with the Democrats on certain issues, with safer supermajorities. And there will always be those kind of Republicans. Now the House and the Senate can pass bills that the governor would almost certainly veto, and she does so quite often. But she remains powerless to do so to any bill that passes with at least a 2/3 vote in both chambers. For instance, if a school choice bill was proposed and was passed by the House and Senate with nothing less than a 2/3 majority vote, it doesn't matter who the governor is at that point. That's the vital importance of a supermajority. For a broader view of this on this particular topic, out of the 50 states, 28 of them have Republican control in both chambers, 18 of them being supermajorities. 20 of them are in Democrat control, and only 6 of them having supermajorities. That's actually a pretty remarkable difference. And then the other 2 remaining states are split between the 2. And just to be clear, though, some of this data, it might be a little different because some of it's old, and some of it I'm using from this current election, but some of it might be a little bit outdated from last time. And then there are various other things that happened as well. Unfortunately, it wasn't a great day for the opposition of abortion. The pro-life stance only won 3 out of the 10 amendments on the state level, and then even one of them, Florida, even though it thankfully passed, or didn't pass, thankfully it didn't pass, the vote taught us that 57% of the population in Florida are still in favor of unrestricted abortion rights. So a legal victory, but not an ideological one. Also, technically, it was just 2 states, 2.5. Nebraska passed a right to abortion amendment, but they denied the one that would have allowed for them to happen after the first trimester. So kind of a mix there. And then just want to say good for South Dakota for turning it down pretty emphatically. I think it was like 59-41 said no. Although that is still a much lower vote share than Trump got So it's still some crossover there. And my takeaway from it all? Not bad. The Republicans have a trifecta control in the U.S. government, as they will have the president and a bare minimum of a 53 to 47 advantage in the Senate and a likely small margin in the House. It's easy to be afraid that they won't do anything noticeably beneficial for the country and use the excuse that they can't do anything radical because it'll endanger their re-election chances. Rinse and repeat over and over again. But if this happens, it at least could buy us some time. And if we, on the individual level, are making sacrifices, praying, and doing what we can for the glory of God in our own circles of influence, then God will continue to show us his mercy through this. And good things may happen that otherwise would be impossible to expect if we were looking at the humanity of our leaders. And this emphatic blowout does show that there's still a decent number of people here that reject the insane, God-hating agenda that the Democrats so proudly push. Something symbolic you can take at face value is that at Harris's rally, when someone shouted Christ is King, she told them, "You don't belong here." And then at Trump's rally, they had someone singing Ave Maria. Wherever there is glory and honor given to God and devotion to his mother, no matter how small or imperfect it might be, there God can work. And that's why ultimately it was a good thing that Republicans won this election and Democrats didn't. And so, yeah, with all that said, that's everything I got for you today. You have a great rest of your weekend, and God bless you.